All right, here's another topic that I've noticed coming up, and I totally understand it, especially after watching receiver, why people would be just all about Debo Samuel. And you should be. I mean, Debo's a hell of a player. He's a phenomenal player. But and not only that, actually not but and Ayuk kind of fallen out of favor with Niner fans, right? Like, how long is this thing going to drag on? And how many things are you going to let play out through the media? I understand the frustration of Niner fans. I personally don't care as much, I guess. I just want him signed. I think he's going to get signed. But I can understand why people would be a little bit frustrated with Brandon Ayuk. I get it. I really do. And then you add in the show receiver where it's like you just see up close and personal Debo Samuel, who he is as a person. It's like, well, I mean, what are we really talking about here? And then people talk about the record. They were 0-3 this year without Debo Samuel. Now people are saying, listen, if it comes down to choosing between these two, and it likely will next year, just let Ayuk play on the 5th-year option and let Debo stick around. Okay, I mean, they're both really good players for sure. I personally don't subscribe to that though. If I'm choosing between the two at the end of this year, I'm definitely taking Ayuk. For me, it's not a question. I think first of all, let me talk about the stat. 0-3 last year. Let's not forget that the year prior they were 4-0 without Debo. Okay. And truth be told, they were 1-0 without Ayuk this year, although that was against a really bad Giants team that was falling apart, awful, couldn't really beat anybody. But that being said, they were 1-0 without Ayuk. And if I were to go through all the opponents without Debo the year prior, sure that they weren't the best teams either. I get it. And I think Debo is the more dynamic player. But let's get back to the record thing. They were 4-0 2 seasons ago without Debo. Okay. One of those games was with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, and I believe the rest of them, the other 3, were with Brock Purdy at quarterback. Okay. So then you look at this year, and they're 0-3. And I always questioned it because one thing that people forget is that when Debo Samuel was out, Trent Williams was also out. He missed 2 of those games. And one of those games, he was really hurt, literally said, I shouldn't have been on the field. But I knew that Debo was out. CMC also got hurt in that game against the Browns, if you remember. And he's like, I can't leave this game. But he knew that he was a shell of himself. So really, he was there, but he wasn't Trent Williams. And they lost that game as well. So they went 0-3 technically without Debo. But let's not forget that against the Packers, a majority of that game was played without Debo Samuel as well. Now, I'm not saying it was easy, but it was a playoff game. It was win or go home. It was a tight game. And they did find a way to win that game, right? It's obvious that having Debo on this team, they're better. Nobody's arguing, is this team better with Debo or without Debo? That's not the argument. This team is better with Debo. This team is better with Brandon Ayuk. If you could just keep them both forever and let them play out their careers, great. But likely you're going to have to choose between the 2 of them. So I think people get caught up in this record thing and they forget actually how things played out. And when you look at it, he's missed 8 games over the last 2 seasons, and they're 5-3 in those games. The 3 losses, they also happen to be 2 of them without Trent Williams and 1 of them with a very banged up Trent Williams, who by his own admission said that he probably shouldn't have finished that game. Okay. That's the real context behind this whole situation. And how about the bigger thing? How about 8 missed games over the course of the last 2 years? It's a lot of games missed. It's far too many games missed. And Debo is getting older. Usually health doesn't get better as you age. Now, maybe sometimes you can get lucky. I think George Kittle himself is somebody who misses games on a pretty regular basis, a couple games a season. You can count on it almost every year. Not last year. He got older. For some reason, was able to stay healthier. That's great. But generally, as you age, it becomes harder to bounce back. So I'm looking at it and saying, okay, I believe that, first of all, I think Debo's going to have a great year this year. He's in phenomenal shape. He's dialed in. He knows he's fighting for his 49er life and really a second big contract, I should say. He's dialed in. He's ready to go. So I think he's going to have a fantastic season. Health, I mean, that's more luck than anything. We'll see if he can stay healthy again. But he is very close to 30 years old. Brandon Ayuk is still 4 years away. He just turned 26. I would bet that the best year that Debo's ever had was the year that he was fighting for that first contract. And I would be shocked if he ever eclipsed that year. So we've already likely seen the best of Debo Samuel. If you had to bet everything you had on Brandon Ayuk in the season he had, which was a good season, but it still wasn't a ton of targets. It still could have been better. And he missed essentially 2 games he didn't play. And that was a 15-game season he did that in. Because one, everybody sat week 16. And then, week 18, game 17. And he missed the game versus the Giants. But if you look at the accumulation of numbers, I think almost everybody would say the best is yet to come for Brandon Ayuk. So for me, I love the show receiver. I love the way that Debo showed who he was through that show. I think Debo's a hell of a player. If I'm just looking at Debo and I'm looking at Brandon Ayuk, like who's more dynamic, it's Debo Samuel. He's clearly the more electric player. If I'm betting on one of them to take over a game, just fully take over a game, I mean, Debo, right? Ayuk is more of like steady Eddie, but he has made some big time plays. I mean, NFC Championship, I was there. It was about as electric of a play that could be made, but he doesn't just take over games the way that Debo Samuel does. I get that. But you can count on him usually being healthy, always being ready to go, always in shape. He's never had the question of is he or isn't he? We know that he's younger. I think most of us think the best is yet to come. If I have to choose between the two, even with all the things that have happened recently, I would still take Brandon Ayuk, and I wouldn't think twice about it. So I think that a lot of fans are really looking at it, and they're kind of getting caught up in the Ayuk stuff and being tired of it and frustrated. And then they're watching Debo Samuel being there, mentoring the young receivers, being in shape, watching him on receiver. And I think that they're like, man, like just give me Debo. And maybe today, I guess if money aside, just for one season right now, for 1 year, maybe I would take Debo. But we're talking about for the next 3-4 seasons, give me Brandon Ayuk. Give me Brandon Ayuk. And I think people are frustrated now, but assuming he does sign, and I think he will, I think that deal still gets done. By week 3, couple touchdowns, 100-yard game or 2, 6-8 catches, 100 yards, a touchdown, week 2, whenever that comes. I think people will be back on the Brandon Ayuk train for sure. For sure. So I think that eventually it'll be a moot point, but right now it is a real discussion. And I think a lot of people are just kind of fed up with the whole situation and really love Debo Samuel, as you should. You should love Debo, but give me Brandon Ayuk for sure.